My name is Natalie Reynolds, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I'd feel a sense of satisfaction hearing that my younger brother, Aaron, had been arrested. The golden child, the favorite, the one my parents would sacrifice anything for, even their peace, their dignity, while leaving me to drown during my divorce and financial collapse just 2 years earlier. The call came at 2 a.m. Mom was sobbing. Dad was yelling in the background. They needed my legal expertise, my money, my help. After a lifetime of being second best, it felt as if the tables had finally turned. Before I tell you how I responded to their desperate plea, take a moment to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, what happened next would forever change the dynamics of our family. Growing up in suburban Boston, we look like the perfect American family, at least from the outside. My father, William, was a hospital administrator, and my mother, Catherine, taught third grade at the local elementary school. We lived in a charming colonial-style home with a spacious backyard, took summer vacations to Cape Cod, and attended church every Sunday. Our photo albums show a smiling little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin, but pictures only show the story their owners want to preserve. From as far back as I can remember, my parents placed impossibly high expectations on me. I learned to read before kindergarten, skipped first grade, and was enrolled in every enrichment program they could find. Piano on Mondays, advanced math on Wednesdays, competitive swimming on weekends. In the Reynolds household, failure was not an option. Then, when I was 8, everything changed. My baby brother, Aaron, arrived, a tiny bundle with wispy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. My mother cooed over him endlessly, and my father proudly paraded him to the neighbors. I was thrilled to be a big sister, naive to how completely his arrival would reshape my world. The first signs were subtle. My long-awaited piano recital, marked on the calendar for months, was suddenly missed because Aaron had a slate fever. Nothing serious, just enough to keep both parents home. I played Beethoven after 3 months of practice, but the seats where they should have sat remained empty. As years passed, the pattern became unshakable. Aaron became the son our family revolved around. When he started Little League Baseball, my parents never missed a single game, cheering proudly from the bleachers and matching shirts with his face and number printed across the front. Meanwhile, at my ballet recitals, debate tournaments, and honor society ceremonies, I often found myself scanning the crowd for faces that were never there. So I learned to depend on myself. While Aaron got new sports gear overnight and help with his science projects, I worked babysitting jobs from age 12 to buy my own school supplies and stayed up late finishing assignments alone. I even learned to forge my mother's signature when she was too busy helping Aaron with his homework to sign my permission slips. By 14, I qualified for a prestigious statewide piano competition. After months of practice, the big day arrived. I dressed carefully, fixed my hair, and waited by the door. 10 minutes before we needed to leave, my mother mentioned casually that they wouldn't be coming. Aaron's baseball game had been rescheduled, and they couldn't miss it. I took 3 buses alone to perform Chopin before a hall of strangers, won second place, and rode home with the silver trophy resting on my lap. When I arrived, no one asked how it went. The house was empty. They were still at Aaron's game. Despite everything, I still hoped my achievements would one day earn their love. I graduated as valedictorian, and as I gave my speech, I saw them in the crowd, pride flickering in their eyes, for a brief moment. But after the ceremony, the conversation quickly shifted to Aaron's baseball prospects and future scholarships, though he was only a freshman. That evening at dinner, my favorite restaurant surprisingly chosen for me, my father raised his glass for a toast. My heart swelled, waiting for words of recognition. "Your success reflects well on this family, Natalie. Now Aaron can see what hard work looks like." I smiled, clinked my glass, and swallowed both the champagne and the disappointment. Even my greatest accomplishments were only valuable for what they could teach my brother. Through it all, I held on to one dream: becoming a lawyer. I didn't just want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be the lawyer, a top-tier attorney at a prestigious firm, someone who made a real difference. Part of it came from my genuine love for justice. But deep down, I knew another motive drove me just as hard. The desperate hope that maybe, finally, my parents would see my worth. I studied for the SATs with near manic determination, joined every club that would look good on college applications, and rewrote my personal statement dozens of times. When the acceptance letters came, including one from a renowned East Coast university with an elite pre-law program, my parents offered a quick, perfunctory congratulations. That same week, Aaron hit a home run in a regular season baseball game. My parents threw an extravagant family dinner in his honor and surprised him with an expensive new gaming console. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. Still, I told myself it didn't hurt anymore, even as I cried quietly in my room that night, clutching my acceptance letter. College was supposed to be my escape, a clean break from years of being the lesser-loved child. And in many ways it was. I thrived academically, making the dean's list every semester and landing competitive internships. While Aaron struggled through community college, my parents covered his full tuition, bought him a car for his commute, and even hired tutors when he failed basic courses. Meanwhile, they informed me they could only contribute a small amount toward my education. "I understand tuition is expensive," my father said over the phone, "but you're smart enough to figure it out." Still, the tension simmered, quiet but persistent. 12 days before our 6th anniversary, I came home early, planning to surprise James with tickets to his favorite jazz musician's concert. But the surprise was mine. I found him in our bedroom with my colleague, Sarah, a junior associate who had joined the firm 3 months earlier. The confrontation that followed was vicious. James didn't deny the affair. Instead, he turned the blame on me. "If you were ever home, if you cared more about our marriage than your job, if you weren't so emotionally distant." Each accusation landed like a blade, cutting into old wounds carved by years of parental neglect. Was I truly incapable of being loved? Was I broken in some fundamental way that made me unworthy of loyalty? That night, I packed a small bag and checked into a hotel, unable to face the apartment, the bed, the life, the memories. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time since joining the firm and spent the day cycling between tears and numb silence, staring at the wall. In a moment of weakness, I called my mother. I needed comfort, not as a lawyer or an adult, but as a daughter desperate for love. Through sobs, I told her what happened, how shattered I felt, how my life had come undone. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "Well, Natalie," she said matter-of-factly, "marriages take work. Maybe if you'd focused more on being a wife than a lawyer, things would be different." Her words hit like a physical blow. In that moment, I didn't need judgment disguised as wisdom. I needed compassion. I ended the call abruptly and sat in silence, realizing that even in my darkest hour, my parents couldn't offer the love most daughters take for granted. 2 weeks later, the divorce proceedings began. What I thought would be a straightforward separation turned ugly fast. James hired an aggressive attorney who challenged our prenuptial agreement, claiming he'd signed under duress. He demanded half my partnership earnings, even though we'd only been married 6 years and had no children. Legal fees mounted quickly. Then, as if the universe wasn't done testing me, a pipe burst in the apartment above mine, flooding my unit and destroying much of what I owned. With my belongings in storage and hotel bills draining my savings, my finances unraveled fast. My performance at work suffered, my focus fractured under the weight of everything collapsing at once. Finally, desperate and humbled, I picked up the phone and called my father. I explained that I needed a temporary loan, just $15,000, to secure a new apartment and cover my living expenses until the divorce was finalized. I promised to repay every cent with interest, I told him. "Your mother and I are on a fixed income now, Natalie. We can't just bail you out of problems you should have anticipated. You're a grown woman with a good job. Figure it out." The conversation left me trembling with anger and disbelief. 2 days later, my cousin Jennifer called to catch up and mentioned casually that my parents had just given Aaron $50,000 to expand his struggling business. I thanked her for the call, then hurled my phone against the hotel wall so hard the screen shattered.
The months that followed my parents' rejection were the hardest of my life. The divorce dragged on, with James and his attorney using every possible delaying tactic. My focus at work suffered, putting my partnership track at risk. I was forced to move into a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, a far cry from the spacious Lincoln Park home that I had shared with James. Through a mutual friend, I learned that my mother had told several relatives that my divorce was my own fault for being career-obsessed and neglecting my husband. The betrayal cut deep, not only because she blamed me for James's infidelity, but because she spread that judgment to others while offering me no support. I worked 60, sometimes 70-hour weeks trying to keep my career afloat while navigating the divorce proceedings. I ate microwave dinners standing at my kitchen counter, fell asleep with case files scattered across my bed, and woke up each morning with anxiety so heavy it made breathing difficult. Through it all, my parents remained distant, our rare calls short and perfunctory. The contrast between their treatment of me and Aaron became even more painful. While I struggled alone and unsupported, Aaron continued to receive not just financial backing, but emotional comfort as well. When his memorabilia business inevitably failed, my parents immediately funded his next venture, a sports-themed bar near Fenway Park. One evening, scrolling through social media in my empty apartment, I came across photos of my parents with Aaron and his new girlfriend on vacation in Florida, 4 of them smiling on a sunny beach, cocktails in hand, without a care in the world. The same month they told me they couldn't afford to help me find housing during my crisis. When Christmas came, I couldn't face returning to Boston to sit at that family table and pretend everything was fine. I called and claimed that my workload made travel impossible, a transparent lie that no one questioned. I spent the holiday alone, watching old movies and drinking too much wine. Through social media, I watched my extended family celebrate together. Piles of gifts under the tree, many tagged with Aaron's name. My mother sent me a department store gift card with a generic note. When my father's 60th birthday approached in February, I decided to make an effort to reconnect. I flew to Boston for the weekend celebration, bringing a thoughtfully chosen watch I could barely afford. It was my peace offering, an attempt to rebuild bridges despite everything. At the party, I felt invisible. My mother introduced me to her friends as my daughter, the lawyer from Chicago, her tone polite but cold. So different from the warmth she showed when presenting Aaron as my brilliant son who owns his own business. That business, of course, was the one they had funded and that would close 6 months later. The breaking point came during dinner when my mother pulled me aside, pretending to check in on how I was doing. I made the mistake of being honest, sharing that the divorce was finally nearing completion, but that I was struggling with the emotional fallout, the betrayal, the loneliness. She sighed, patting my hand in a gesture that felt more dismissive than comforting. "You know, Natalie," she said, "if you had tried harder with James, been more attentive, more supportive of his needs, things might have turned out differently."
Men need to feel appreciated. Her words hit me like a slap. My husband had cheated on me with a colleague in our own bed, and my mother was suggesting it was my fault for not being attentive enough. The double standard was staggering. When Aaron's girlfriend had broken up with him because of his irresponsibility and lack of ambition, my parents had comforted him for weeks, insisting she wasn't good enough for him. I stood up, my hands shaking. "You have never, not once in my entire life, given me the same benefit of the doubt or support you freely give Aaron," I said quietly but firmly. "I've done everything right. I've worked myself to exhaustion to make you proud. I've been independent because I had to be, not because I wanted to be. And still, you find a way to make my pain my fault." I left the party early and changed my flight to that night. On the plane back to Chicago, I made a decision that was both terrifying and freeing. I would stop seeking the approval and love that had been withheld for 30 years. I would build a life without the constant weight of disappointment. I would, in essence, divorce my parents, just as I had divorced James. Over the next several months, I ignored calls from home, sent brief replies to texts, and found excuses to avoid visits. I mailed cards for birthdays and holidays, maintaining only the bare minimum of contact to prevent family scandal. When asked how I was doing, I offered vague, cheerful answers that shut down conversation. Without the emotional drain of seeking their approval, I found new energy to rebuild. The divorce was finally settled. James received less than he demanded, though more than he deserved. I was left with debt, yes, but also with freedom and clarity. For the first time in years, I felt light enough to breathe. No longer distracted by family drama or marital chaos, I threw myself into my work. Complex cases became my refuge. I often stayed in the office until the cleaning staff arrived, my focus razor sharp. My billable hours exceeded targets by 40%, and senior partners began to take notice. Still, I knew that working myself to exhaustion was not sustainable, so I made the difficult choice to confront my emotional wounds. I found a therapist, Dr. Rivera, who specialized in family dynamics and parental favoritism. Our weekly sessions were often excruciating, peeling back layers of hurt I had suppressed for decades. You've spent your entire life trying to earn love that should have been freely given, Dr. Rivera said during one particularly painful session. The truth hit me so hard it brought tears to my eyes, but it also marked the beginning of genuine healing. Slowly, I built a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued me for who I truly was. My assistant, Rachel, began inviting me to her family gatherings, where her warm, loud Italian-American relatives embraced me without question. Junior associates at the firm sought my mentorship, appreciating the kind of guidance I had always longed for early in my own career. Most importantly, I developed a close relationship with Victoria Chen, a senior partner known for her brilliance and brutal honesty. At 58, she became the mentor I never had. After watching me handle a particularly difficult deposition, she invited me for coffee and offered candid feedback. You have exceptional analytical skills and presence in the courtroom, but you work like someone trying to outrun something. Sustainable success requires balance. Under her mentorship, I began to work more strategically, focusing on quality over quantity and building my own client relationships instead of simply executing work for others. When a high-profile corporate fraud case came in involving a major pharmaceutical company, Victoria recommended me to lead the defense team, despite my relatively junior status. The case consumed 6 months of my life, but ended in a favorable settlement that saved the client millions and led to real compliance reforms. The morning after the settlement, I walked into my office to find a handwritten note from Victoria on my desk. Exceptional work. Natalie, you have earned your place at the table, not by working yourself to death, but by being smarter and more strategic than your opponents. I see great things ahead for you. I framed the note and hung it behind my desk. It reminded me that true recognition comes from people who actually see your worth. With my career thriving, financial stability followed. By my 31st birthday, I had paid off all divorce-related debt and saved enough for a down payment on a modest but elegant condo overlooking Lake Michigan. Signing the mortgage papers in my own name, no co-signer, no dependents, was one of the proudest moments of my life. My interactions with my parents during this time were minimal and carefully managed. I called on major holidays, sent polite gifts, and deflected questions about visits with vague references to work. I rarely mentioned my achievements, knowing they would be brushed aside before the conversation inevitably turned to Aaron. Through relatives, I learned that Aaron's cycle of failure continued, business ventures collapsing one after another, each one rescued by my parents' money. My parents even refinanced their home to fund his projects, a detail they never mentioned in our rare phone calls. During this period of rebuilding, I cautiously re-entered the dating world. After a few unremarkable first dates arranged by friends, I met Michael at a charity gala hosted by my firm. A pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a sharp sense of humor, he approached relationships with the same quiet dedication he gave his patients. Unlike James, who had resented my ambition, Michael admired it. He understood the demands of a high-pressure career and never made me feel guilty for late nights or weekend work.
More importantly, he recognized my emotional scars and never used them as weapons when we disagreed. After 8 months of dating, I finally told him the full story of my family, the favoritism, the betrayal, the years of longing. I expected awkward sympathy or hollow advice. Instead, Michael simply listened, then reached across the table and said, "Your parents' failure to value you properly reflects their limitations, not your worth. Their inability to love you as you deserve says everything about them and nothing about you." His words were simple but transformative. For the first time, I truly understood that the problem had never been me. No level of success or perfection could have fixed the imbalance in my parents' hearts. That realization was liberating. It changed the way I saw everything. As my personal and professional life flourished, the updates about Aaron grew troubling. There were whispers of gambling debts, DUIs handled quietly with expensive lawyers, and investors threatening lawsuits. My parents shielded him, as always, mortgaging their future to protect him from his own decisions. My feelings were complicated, a blend of hurt, frustration, and reluctant compassion. A small, shameful part of me felt vindicated by his failures, but another part grieved for the brother I barely knew. We had never been close. Parental favoritism made sure of that. Once, during a business trip to Boston, I reached out, suggesting coffee.
His response was curt and dismissive, clearly shaped by whatever story my parents had told him about me. I didn't push further. Some relationships, I realized, are not meant to be repaired. By my 32nd birthday, I had finally built a life that felt whole. I had meaningful friendships, a relationship rooted in respect and kindness, and a career trajectory beyond my wildest ambitions. I believed I had truly moved on, finally free from the dysfunction of my past. I was wrong. The real test came at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the quiet of my bedroom. Michael stirred beside me as I reached for the glowing screen. It was my parents' number. My heart dropped. Someone must have died, I thought. "Natalie," my mother's voice was trembling, high-pitched in panic. "We need your help. It's Aaron. He's been arrested." I sat up instantly, adrenaline flooding my system. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. The story spilled out between her sobs and my father's angry shouting in the background. Aaron had been arrested for wire fraud and embezzlement linked to his latest business, a cryptocurrency platform that turned out to be a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The authorities claimed he had defrauded investors of nearly $2 million. "He needs a lawyer, Natalie, a good one," my mother pleaded. "Your father and we put up our house for his bail, but we need help with the legal fees." "You work at that big firm. You must know people. You have to help us." The desperation in my mother's voice was palpable. For a moment, I felt that old familiar tug, the instinct to fix things, to earn approval. But right beside it rose a flood of bitter memories. All those times I had needed help and was told to figure it out myself. The silence during my divorce. The decades of favoritism that had shaped my childhood and early adulthood. I could picture them clearly now. In their Boston home, my mother in her floral robe, my father pacing in his slippers, their perfect world collapsing as the golden child finally faced consequences they couldn't shield him from. For the first time, they needed me more than I needed them. "I'll need to know more details before I can offer any advice," I said carefully, my professional training kicking in despite the emotional storm inside me. "How much is the bail? What are the exact charges? Who's representing him currently?" As they answered, the picture became clearer and uglier. Aaron had built a fake cryptocurrency company promising extraordinary returns. He'd used early investors' money to fund an extravagant lifestyle, all while luring new victims with fabricated success stories.
When the scheme inevitably collapsed, furious investors went to the authorities. The evidence against him was overwhelming. My parents had already mortgaged their home to post his $500,000 bail, draining their retirement savings. The court had assigned him a public defender whom my father dismissed as useless. They wanted me to either represent Aaron myself or convince my firm to take the case pro bono. On top of that, they needed money for daily expenses while they focused on supporting Aaron through his crisis. Natalie, you have to understand. Your father is having chest pains from all the stress. We're still your parents no matter what disagreements we've had. Family helps family. The words landed like a cruel joke. Family helps family. Where was that loyalty when I had needed it most? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I'll need to think about this, I said finally, keeping my voice steady. It's the middle of the night, and there's a lot to process. I'll call you tomorrow once I've had time to consider the options. My mother began to protest, but I ended the call with a firm goodbye. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, phone still in hand, emotions swirling. Michael turned on the bedside lamp and studied my face with quiet concern. "Family emergency?" he asked gently. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Family hypocrisy emergency is more accurate. I told him everything. The call, Aaron's crimes, the decades of favoritism that made the situation so painfully ironic. "What are you thinking of doing?" Michael asked softly, not offering advice, just giving space for me to think. My first instinct is to tell them to figure it out themselves, to use their own words against them. They abandoned me during the worst time of my life, and now they expect me to swoop in and save their precious son? I paced the bedroom, the anger making sleep impossible. The more I thought about it, the more the rage built. Every birthday centered on Aaron, every achievement of mine dismissed, every plea for support ignored, while he was endlessly rescued. 30 decades of inequality and emotional neglect had all led to this, their audacious plea for help. I could refuse outright. It would be justified, maybe even cathartic. I imagined saying no, letting them feel the same cold abandonment they had shown me. The fantasy was sweet, but it didn't last. Or I could help unconditionally, fall back into that old pattern of earning love through sacrifice, take on Aaron's case, write their checks, be the good daughter again. The thought made my stomach turn. Neither option felt right. Neither reflected the woman I had worked hard to become. I spent the rest of the night wrestling with the decision, weighing justice against mercy, boundaries against compassion. By morning, I knew I needed guidance. I called Dr. Rivera and arranged an emergency session during my lunch break. "They've placed you in an impossible position," she observed after I explained everything. "But this is also an opportunity to establish a new dynamic based on honesty and boundaries, not resentment and submission." We talked through different responses, what healthy limits would look like, and how to act without losing myself again. By the end of the session, I had a plan, one that honored both my history and my healing. That evening, I called my parents back. Michael sat beside me on the couch, silent but supportive, as I began. "I've given your situation a lot of thought," I said when my father answered. "I'm willing to help, but we need to be clear about what that help means." A pause. My father's voice came low and guarded. "What exactly do you mean?" "I'll consult on Aaron's legal situation and recommend attorneys who specialize in white-collar crime. But I will not personally represent him or ask my firm to take the case pro bono. That would be unethical. I will also not provide financial assistance for his fees or your living expenses. What I am offering is my professional expertise and guidance through the process, on one condition. All of us, including Aaron, attend family therapy. Silence. Long, tense silence. When my father finally spoke, his voice was tight with anger. So you're using our crisis as leverage to force therapy on us? This is about your brother facing serious charges, Natalie, not about your feelings or childhood grievances. I had anticipated this response. The deflection, the minimization, the same patterns that had defined our family for decades. But this time, I was ready. No, Dad, I said firmly.
Intent and impact are often two very different things. We spoke for nearly an hour, circling around deeper wounds, carefully avoiding explosions that therapy would soon bring to the surface. I kept my boundaries firm, redirecting whenever they tried to make the conversation entirely about Aaron or downplay the issues I was raising. As I prepared to leave for my hotel, my father asked a question that caught me completely off guard. His voice, for once, carried something close to vulnerability. "Were we really so terrible to you?" I paused at the doorway, considering my response. I had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed every accusation, every memory, every hurt. But in that instant, I realized listing grievances wouldn't bring healing. "You were wonderful parents to Aaron," I said softly. "I just needed you to be wonderful parents to me, too." The next morning's therapy session was exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. Aaron attended, sullen, defensive, clearly only there because he knew I held leverage over his legal support. My parents presented a facade of polite cooperation, thinly veiling deep resistance. Dr. Marshall, calm and composed, recognized the family dynamic almost immediately. Over 2 hours, she established clear ground rules, conducted brief individual assessments, and scheduled follow-up sessions. When my father tried to dominate the conversation, she gently redirected. When my mother grew tearful over Aaron's potential prison time, Dr. Marshall acknowledged her fear, but firmly steered the focus back to the family's long-standing patterns of avoidance and favoritism. I returned to Chicago the following day, having arranged to join future sessions via video when travel wasn't possible. Over the next several weeks, I maintained contact with Aaron's attorney, helping interpret legal complexities and advise my parents on the process. The two journeys, Aaron's legal case and our family therapy, unfolded side by side. In court, Aaron eventually accepted a plea deal requiring full restitution to victims, a substantial fine, and 2 years of house arrest, followed by 5 years of probation. He avoided prison primarily because of his attorney's skill and his cooperation with federal investigators pursuing larger cryptocurrency fraud networks. In therapy, progress came slowly and unevenly. The initial sessions were tense and often unproductive, with my parents resistant to examining their role in the family dysfunction. My father, in particular, struggled with the idea that his parenting had been anything less than exemplary. Aaron vacillated between resentful participation and rare moments of genuine insight about how parental enablement had contributed to his poor choices. The breakthrough came nearly 3 months into therapy, during a session focused on my experience growing up as the less favorite child. Dr. Marshall asked me to share specific memories that illustrated the disparity in treatment. With her guidance, I described pivotal moments from my childhood and early adulthood, speaking not in accusation, but in an earnest effort to help my parents understand the cumulative impact of their choices. I recalled the missed piano recital when I was 9, the high school valedictorian speech where they quickly shifted attention to Aaron, the law school graduation they skipped for his recreational baseball game, and finally,
their refusal to help during my divorce while continuing to fund his failing ventures. As I spoke, I watched my mother's face crumple with a recognition I had never seen before. When she finished, silence filled the room. "I had no idea," she whispered at last, tears streaming down her face. "I never saw it that way. I thought you were the strong one, the independent one who didn't need us the way Aaron did." My father sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched, but I could see the conflict in his eyes, the beginning of an uncomfortable reckoning with decades of choices. In the sessions that followed, we began the painful process of rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. There were setbacks and difficult moments. My father stormed out of one particularly tense session when Dr. Marshall challenged his double standards for his son and daughter. Aaron skipped several appointments when the discussions became too confronting. Yet slowly, incrementally, change began to root. My mother started calling me directly, not to talk about Aaron, but to ask about my work, my relationship with Michael, and my life in Chicago. My father, after weeks of resistance, finally broke down during a one-on-one session with Dr. Marshall. In our next family meeting, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "I was wrong, Natalie," he said, his voice trembling. "I told myself I was a good father because I provided for you, because I pushed you to succeed, but I failed to give you what every child deserves, unconditional love and support. I failed you, and I am deeply sorry." The apology wasn't a magical fix for decades of hurt, but it was a beginning, a foundation upon which we could build something new. 6 months after Aaron's arrest, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Geneva. When I called to share the news with my parents, my mother asked thoughtful questions about our plans and offered to help in any way we wanted without trying to take control. My father expressed genuine happiness and, for the first time in my memory, pride in me that wasn't compared to Aaron. We planned a small wedding for the following spring. Throughout the process, my parents respected our choices and contributed financially with no strings attached. On the day of the wedding, my father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. During his toast, he spoke words I had waited a lifetime to hear. "Natalie has always been extraordinary," he said, looking directly at me. "Her intelligence, her determination, her capacity for forgiveness and growth have humbled me. I am more proud to be her father than words can express." Aaron attended the wedding with his new girlfriend, a grounded, sincere woman who seemed to expect accountability from him in a way previous partners had not. Our relationship remained complicated, but therapy had helped us begin to relate as adults rather than competitors for love and attention. The journey of healing our family has neither been quick nor easy. There have been painful conversations, difficult realizations, and moments where we slipped back into old patterns. Yet the honesty we've built has made something possible I once thought was out of reach. A relationship with my parents based on mutual respect rather than performance and approval seeking. I no longer measure my worth by their validation. The confidence and self-respect I fought so hard to earn have become a natural part of who I am, regardless of anyone's approval. And paradoxically, it was only when I stopped desperately seeking their acceptance that a healthier relationship finally became possible. If you've ever felt like the less favored child, if you've spent years trying to earn love that should have been freely given, know this: your worth is not defined by someone else's inability to value you properly. Healing begins the moment you realize the problem was never you. Have you experienced favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more journeys of self-worth, boundaries, and healing.
Remember, sometimes the most important family we have is the one we choose for ourselves. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage on your own path to healing.